Hi everyone and welcome to our next episode of Prague Walks. And today's special topic is floods. In case you haven't read the news, as you can see, parts of the riverbank are still underwater, but I would say we're out of the woods now. And we are starting our walk at one of the most historical bridges in Prague, and this is the old train bridge. This one dates back to 1872. And as you can see, it is quite rusty, so it is going to be replaced in a couple of years. Parts of this bridge are going to be recycled for a pedestrian bridge, probably somewhere in Huchle, but that is still being discussed. And they're going to install a new bridge here. It's going to be just for trains and also a train station. But that's only going to happen in 2026. So now we still have a chance to walk on the old train bridge and enjoy some of the beautiful views of Prague. On this side we have stunning Vyšehrad, so let's do that. Right now we are below the train bridge next to the stop called WWII, and WWII is an old river tax. Back in the day, they were transporting a lot of wood over the river, so they had to collect taxes on that. And WWII was the collection of every 12th log that they would transport in a big batch. Later, they just replaced it with a regular monetary tax. The whole area here, called Podskali, was a big point for many river services, and that's where a lot of raftsmen were working. Pretty much unused profession nowadays, but back in the day they were doing a lot of jobs because river transport was seasonal. Once the river would be frozen in winter, they would have to earn their living somehow else. They would collect sand from the bottom of the river, they would deliver wood, and they would also cut the ice. They would hook it, pull it to the bank, load it onto special carts and deliver it to, for example, breweries which needed a lot of ice, or other places where they needed to preserve groceries. And of course, we shouldn't forget the old tax collecting point that has been standing here for a very long time. And if you look at the historical photos, it is still there. So it's one of the only houses that was not destroyed during the big renovations that the city was going through. You can also notice that it's much lower than the ground level. That's because they were raising the bank level when they were reconstructing it. And there inside there is a museum which is dedicated to raftsmen and all those forgotten professions that were connected to the river. It works only on the weekend though, so just FYI. We've arrived to a very interesting device. It is called water level gauge, and it helps to determine the level of floods. So that dial over there measures that. And as you can see, we are close to 2.5, which is pretty high, because if we go to the riverbank, you can see that even the benches over there are underwater. We cannot sit on them just yet. And the bank is blocked off, the lower one at least. So we won't be able to go there maybe for a couple of days until it becomes better. We are jumping to the lesser town for our little historical segment. Floods have been a problem in Prague since the dawn of time. People in Middle Ages found their own ways of how to deal with them. When you go to Charles Bridge, you can find a little face of a man. He's called Bradač. When the water was nearing his chin, people knew it was time to pack up and leave because big water was coming. But here we have a little scale that we can take a look at. Because in this video I would like to talk about three biggest floods that Prague suffered through. And we are starting with the flood of 1784, which is all the way up there. One of the worst floods in Prague's history came in February 1784. It was the aftermath of the eruption of Icelandic volcano lucky. It was followed by an unusually cold winter when a lot of snow accumulated on the tops of the mountains, and then a sudden spike in temperature in the end of February. So the snow melted and the rivers were flooded. So on February 28th, the level of water in Prague rose by 4 meters over just 12 hours, which is really fast, and around 114 streets were flooded, as well as 800 houses. What made matters even worse was the ice on the river. It was breaking and ramming into the Charles Bridge. And one of the statues, the statue of Czech patron saint, Saint Wenceslas, was knocked down. They later found it, but much later, in 2004. We are reaching our next stop, which is Palacký Bridge. Let's come a little closer. We will continue talking about floods in a minute. Let's first address this bridge, one of the most beautiful ones, in my opinion. It is called Palacký Bridge. It is named after František Palacký, who is considered to be the father of Czech nation. If you want to have a look at his face, you can just go across the road. This bridge dates back to 1876, so this is one of the oldest bridges in Prague, and Czech people really like that bridge because originally it had their national colors. It is built of blue granite, red sandstone and white marble. What is missing from that bridge are the 4 statues of the mythical figures from Czech fairy tales and stories. They were removed after a bombing of American air forces that took place on February 14th, 1945. By the way, if you want to learn more about the bombings that took place during the Second World War in Prague, we made a whole video about it. We will link it down below. So back to those 4 statues. Nowadays you can find them elsewhere. Tell us in the comments if you know where those 4 statues are standing nowadays. And now, guys, we will continue this way. It is a lot of people, just a warning, because it turns out that flood is a sort of an attraction today. Let's go. Now we are going to our next stop in the crowd of people. As the lower part of the riverbank is closed, it is obviously really busy here. But let's continue talking about the floods. The next historical flood I wanted to mention is the flood of 1890. The river in Prague, Vltava, it's kind of unlucky because it gets the biggest kick from all the tributary rivers that flow into it. So in 1890, there was a really heavy rain that flooded all the smaller rivers nearby and then caused a bigger flood of Vltava. Sorry, we had to stop here because there were a lot of people coming our way. So even though people in Prague in 1890 knew that the flood was coming because of the news that came from other cities, people still did not realize how quickly the flood would come. So what unfortunately happened was that a group of soldiers, 26 soldiers from Karlín barracks, they were asked to disassemble one of the nearby bridges there, and they were doing just fine, but then within minutes a huge flood washed them away and 20 of them died, only 6 survived. Around 4,000 houses were flooded. People also did not want to leave their houses up until last minute, so the rescue teams were kind of all blocked off also by Praguers, and they reported that 2 women even lost their minds. Literally, they had to be taken to insane asylum because of the sight of their houses just being destroyed by the body of water. One of the worst things that happened during the flood of 1890 was the destruction of the Charles Bridge. As the water was washing off the nearby structures, it accumulated the debris and crashed into the pillars of the Charles Bridge and destroyed 3 of them. One of the middle pillars miraculously survived, which was an interesting coincidence because that was the place where the statue of Saint John of Nepomuk is standing, and he, among other things, is considered to be a patron saint against floods. Because if you remember, according to the legend, he was actually thrown into the water. Okay, let's come closer to our next stop. Alright guys, now we are standing at an iconic landmark which I'm sure most of you will recognize, and that is of course the dancing house. But in this video we are talking about water, so we are gonna ditch the dancing house for now. Maybe a lot of you are tired of it as well. So I'm gonna talk about the water tower, which is right behind me. I don't know if it's there. Václav is pointing, it's there, yeah. I don't have my glasses, I really should start wearing them. Over there, this one is called Šitkov Tower, which sounds like, you know, but it is not, I swear. And this used to be the waterworks tower. It was built in 15th century, so it's one of the only original historical buildings that survived in this area. This tower used to provide the water to all the nearby houses here. Obviously, the waterworks mechanism is not there anymore, but the tower is still here, so at least that. All right, we will continue this way. If only you could smell through the video, you would smell Maybe that's why Václav and I are losing it already. Sheesh. Oh, God. What is the speed limit here?
50 kilometers an hour.
50 kilometers per hour. And we've reached Zsófin. This island was named after the mother of Emperor Francis Joseph, but the first name that it had was actually Barvířský ostrov. It was the island where they colored leather. Later it was renamed into Zsófin, and even later, and that's the current name, is Slavic Island, because there was a Slavic Congress held here. But since we are talking about water and floods in our today's video, let's also mention swimming. Could people actually swim? And the answer is mostly no. So much so that in 1781 they issued an official statement that swimming in the open water was banned, and they even had to open a rescue point next to the Charles Bridge because of that. People who lived close to the riverbank could learn how to swim when they were children. For example, Venošek Drost was a fish in the water since he was 5. When he grew up, he decided that he will swim across La Manche. He found a sponsor, they gave him money for travels and accommodation, and when he came back, he was telling the reporters about his perilous journey and about his difficult swim in the open water. He was describing how he was hit by the waves and how in the end he was carried out of the water by the mayor of Dover himself. This story was spreading all over Prague, so when it turned out that Venošek Drost lied, everyone was upset. But he made it sound so believable. He was also covered in some weird cuts and wounds, so people really believed that he suffered when he swam across La Manche, but in the end he was just partying somewhere. Now you can see the Legi Bridge right behind me, and this bridge is actually not the first one that was built at this exact place. The first one was called Chain bridge, and this is how it looked like. This was the second bridge in Prague. So after Charles Bridge, there was a 450-year gap before they built the second one, and it was a much needed bridge. People were very happy with it. They did not care at all how it looked like, because all they wanted is to be able to cross Vltava River somewhere else than Charles Bridge. Alright guys, we reached our last stop, and here we have to talk about the worst flood not only in Prague's history but also in Czech history. It is the flood of 2002. By the middle of August, it was pretty much clear that a lot of cities and towns in the Czech Republic will be flooded, so it was one of these huge floods that affected the whole country. The level of water rose by 5 meters, which was a record number, and till this day you can find many marks on the buildings which are standing close to the riverbank, where you can see how high the level of water got in 2002. All of the buildings next to the riverbank, as well as Metro and Prague Zoo, were underwater. 134 animals unfortunately died. Other casualties included 17 people. 17,000 square kilometers were damaged by the flood, and 225,000 people had to be evacuated. The damages of 2002 flood were estimated to be 73 billion Czech crowns, and 7 billion was just the metro in Prague. Fortunately, nowadays floods that come are not that bad, because they also perfected the anti-flood system. Nowadays they build the walls next to the banks of the rivers, so there's a big metal wall that is blocking the water from coming into the city. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching our today's video. We definitely underestimated the amount of people that will also wanna have a look at the flood. We hope you liked it nevertheless, and we will see you in our next one. Bye!